You're listening to Boobies and Newbies, brought to you by the Frolic Podcast Network. Happy holidays, everybody, and welcome to a special holiday edition of Boobies and Newbies, the podcast that asks novice romance readers to think outside the dick in a box and brave the unbridled world of erotica. I'm your host, Kelly Reynolds, and today's romance review marks the 9th episode in Boobies and Newbies' annual holiday special, The 12 Days of Boobsmas. The Boobsmas giveaways are all wrapped up, holiday prize packs are in the mail, and we are just days away from Christmas. As much as I wish I could send everybody some holiday swag and paperbacks this season, it just is not possible at this point in time. But you know what could help make it more possible? Supporting Boobies and Newbies on Patreon. It's because of Patreon support that I am able to put together the 12 Days of Boobsmas each year, and for that, I am so grateful. So whether it's $1 or $5 or more, just know that your contribution is deeply appreciated. And if you feel like you don't have the extra cash to spend this year, perfectly fine. It is absolutely 100% free to leave a review for Boobies and Newbies on Apple Podcasts. So please consider doing that as well. Now, as always, you can find the link to our Patreon in today's show notes, where you will also find all of our social media and website links. You can go back and check out the previous 8 Days of Boobsmas episodes, all of which you can find on our website, boobiesandnewbies.com, or on your favorite podcast app. Joining me today for the 9th day of Boobsmas fun is Bookstagrammer, podcaster, and my new NYC brunch bestie, Essie. Welcome, Essie.
Hi! Oh my god, I'm very excited to be doing this. I'm so excited. I mean, it was so cool to meet in person because I feel like for so long it was like these people that I am friends with on the internet, they are real, right? Right.
Are they? Are they real, or are they just like a robot behind a screen? No, I totally get it. It really is weird. Like, I was just talking about this during an Instagram live, saying I feel like I have more internet friends nowadays than I do like real life physical beings in my life.
Yes. And so it's kind of cool and fun to be like, okay, we get to meet and we get to like interact in person. You know, it was like very cool. So I'm very pleased to be here.
Oh my gosh, no, I'm excited to have you. And it was such a joy seeing you, when I was in New York. And hopefully next time you can make it out to Portland, Oregon, when you just happen to be in town in Portland.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know when, but one day, sure.
Someday.
Off to the West Coast I go. I mean, technically, I haven't seen that part of the West Coast. I've seen San Diego, Los Angeles. So I need to explore more because, San Diego was not it for me. Los Angeles had its moments.
It is what it is. Like, honestly, I tell people, and I lived in Los Angeles for 5 years, and I can say, there's definitely places you explore while living there that you wouldn't necessarily see if you're just visiting, much as I'm sure New York is the same way. But I do tell people that LA is pretty much like every TV or movie stereotype you've ever seen about LA. Like, honestly, there is some element of fact there. So that being said, though, the Pacific Northwest, like Oregon, Washington, driving along the coast or driving through, the woods and the mountains, like, it's just beautiful. Like, it's one of those places where when you step outside, the air like smells different.
See, now that I'm thinking about it, I forgot that I'd gone to Vancouver on the Canada side.
Oh, okay,
and
great.
You are correct. The air there is a marked difference where I was like, oh, okay.
In a good way.
So many trees. Yes, in a good, yes. It's not, I say this because coming from New York, I think I had gone in the end of September. So like New York was still warm and unfortunately had the delightful aroma of garbage juice in the air. And so it was really nice to go to Vancouver and be like, wow, y'all don't got that little garbage juice smell? Like you got trees and it smells like earth?
What's that smell? Do
What
I smell the crisp fall air and the bite of winter chill?
Yes. It was very, very interesting to just be like, wow, like people get to do this all the time? Like just breathe this in?
And it's interesting during the pandemic, especially. I feel like so many people left big cities. Like they left LA, New York, San Francisco, Chicago, and they kind of wanted to get out into spaces where they had more space and they had more time and they weren't going at such a rushed pace. And that's not to say that Portland is definitely the smallest city in the world. Like it's not, but it feels ridiculously small when you compare it to like New York. I mean, it feels like a completely different world.
Feel really small when you compare them to New York. Like I feel like everyone's always like, well, and I'm like, so I live in New York, and they're like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, like distances here are. This is a city, like between the people and everything. You're just like, when does it end? And New York's like, I mean, when you get to the edge and the river is there, but you can go up. And it's like, all right.
Then you just cross the river, go to Jersey.
Yep.
And it's so funny now that I'm thinking about, you know, as we dive into like our holiday talk and everything, so many books and movies, if they are set in a city during the holidays, because we know that most of them are usually focused more on like the small town coming home element. But when they are set in a city, the city is normally New York.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder if that's because New York has so many different sort of types of Christmas things that can happen, right? You've got the very like typical, you know, Rockefeller, Bryant Park, you know, the skating rink thing. You've got all of the stores decorated on Fifth Avenue. You've got just like all of this Christmas energy that really starts at Thanksgiving with Thanksgiving Macy's parade nonsense and then stretches through to like the ball drop. Now here's the thing, like anyone who is from New York will never be at the ball drop. Will never be at the parade. Will maybe once every like 8 to 10 years when they have family from out of town go to the windows on Fifth Avenue.
I feel like the only time you would actually do it is if you're bringing people to see it.
Pretty much. The rest of the time you're just like, I don't go around there because why? But it was interesting when you were talking about like everyone leaving for the pandemic and the small spaces, and then I thought to myself, I was like, it's also interesting that like the book that we read, right? She's like leaving the big city because Christmas can be experienced on a different level in a small town that she grew up in a way that she hasn't experienced in Chicago. And I was like, oh, okay. I hadn't thought of it like that because a part of me was like, And I guess I can see that, right? Because massive cities, I think if you're thinking, how do I capture the whole city? Like, that's not possible. You would have to very, like, focus, like, very narrowly in, like, either a neighborhood or a certain, like, part of town. Because if not, it's like, everyone's going to be reading, like, really? They were in the Bronx, and then they went to Staten Island, and then they went, like, no, who's doing all that driving? That's a journey. Exactly. Who's paying all those tolls? No.
Well, you're right, because, like, the small town romance is very like insular. Like it's very much concentrated in like the physical span of like maybe 3 blocks in each direction. You have like the main 5 businesses that you know, continually visit and everybody knows your name. Well, of course they do. You have 5 businesses. Like that's if they don't know your name.
2000. How did they not know your name?
Exactly. But I, for one, would love to see some more diversity in terms of where holiday stories take place and just sort of also what holidays can look like without having to be gingerbread cookies and without having to
Yes.
be, building a snowman. Like, I'm born and raised in California. I've never had a white Christmas. And so
Oh,
I would love to see
I
more of those
have. And
stories.
I also still didn't build snowmen.
Yeah,
Like I
exactly.
grew up, was born in New York. I grew up in Toronto, so I saw snow all my life.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to go play in it. I was like, it's cold and wet. Why? Oh, okay, maybe snow angels, but snowmen. It was just like, "Look, that's too much work, and then it's gonna turn to ice. And who wants to do that? There are other things that are really cool about the holidays that I feel like
Right.
sometimes we don't get to see because it's like gingerbread houses, hot chocolate with marshmallows. I'm like, what if you don't like marshmallows?
It's a
What
very
about?
it's a very curated experience. And I mean,
Yes,
let's face it, it's a very white curated
yes.
experience. Like,
It does feel very, yes, because now that I think about it, it's like a lot of times it's like, oh, these Christmas traditions, and I'm like, uh, my parents are from Latin America. We open presents on Christmas Eve. We don't open them Christmas
mm,
Day. There is no like, no, we've opened them. Like even just seeing like if we're looking sort of at like are characters going to Christmas mass? Like, are these characters Catholic? Like, they may not go to mass any other time of the year, but like, are they going to Christmas mass? Like,
what kind of Catholic are you? We're
yeah,
Christmas Catholic.
exactly. Like we go for Christmas and Easter. We don't go
Yep.
the rest of the year. It's fine. So yeah, it's like I even was thinking like, wouldn't it be cool to see more like when they are focused on the cities, um, maybe more of not quite a neighborhood element, but just like something different. Because it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, when they are set in New York, it's all like Manhattan, Fifth Avenue, and it's like, okay, well, there's like four other boroughs.
You want a very Staten Island Christmas?
I mean, you know what?
No,
Why not?
I get what you're saying though,
All you
especially
love on a
because
ferry.
yeah, well, and depending on the city, like I know New York, and I spent a few years in Chicago, and so I feel, closer tie with that city. But depending on like what borough or neighborhood you're in, there's absolutely a cultural influence
Yes.
there. And so I think you're right. I think you totally could write a story that's like, oh, this is set in the part of Chicago that's like predominantly Polish immigrants and like
Yes.
Polish families who have lived here for, many, many years, and descendants
Yep.
of Polish families who have lived here for many, many years. And what
Yeah.
does that Christmas look like? Do we have to see them hanging out at the Magnificent Mile and like ice skating by the Bean in Chicago? No.
No. Yeah, because it's like, would they actually do that, or would there be other things that they would do that are
Yes.
just as important and traditional in the sense of the holiday that aren't like this very like clear Chicago marker like
Right.
Magnificent Mile and the Bean.
Yeah. Which are great.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Like
Yes.
there's a place for that. There's a place for Rockefeller Center. There's a place for
Yes.
all of those, fun touristy Christmas, big ideas. But I also want to read about like specific family traditions and whether
Yes.
they come from the author themselves or, just stories that they've heard or, friends that have shared their stories with them. That's great. I want to see like a unique experience as opposed to like the traditional curated Christmas that we're so used to that Hallmark
Yes.
continues to give us and somehow translates into our books as well.
Yes.
But let's talk about you and your podcast because you too are a podcaster.
I
Tell
am.
all the people where they can find you and listen to you.
Okay, so the podcast is called Love Essie, like there's a comma in between. And it's available on Spotify, it's available on Apple Podcasts, but I'm also pretty sure you can find it through Google, or like if you went to anchor.fm and typed in Love Essie, I would come up.
What do you talk about on Love Essie?
I've always been a huge romance reader. I started at a really, really young age. And I was like, I want to be able to talk in depth about romance and like my viewpoint. And at first I was like, that's weird. Why would you do that? Who wants to listen to you? But then I don't know. I was having a conversation with someone and they were just kind of like, no, like what you're saying is not something I've heard other people talk about in relation to this. And I was like, oh, maybe I do have a unique viewpoint. So I generally, I talk about either, usually it's one book, sometimes I'll do two. And I'm really just going in. Usually I start off trying not to spoil things. So usually the first section of the podcast is me talking about like any overall themes that I'm seeing, both within the book, within the author's work, if I've read a lot of the author's work, and maybe how it also is even tying to, I mean, what we're going through on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of go into like, what I call the spoiler section. I'm like, okay, if you haven't read the book and spoilers are like, your kryptonite, you can stop now because I'm about to just spoil it to hell and back. And because I'm also a massive, massive Nalini Singh stan, I have recorded episodes for every single book in both the Side Changeling series and the Guild Hunter series. I realized that I haven't fully done her contemporary series, which is the Brockhart
It's only a
the
matter of
brothers.
time. I'm
And
sure you'll get to
it's
them.
only I literally was like, oh wait, I still have to do those. Because aside from her thrillers, I've read her entire backlist, including what she did with Harlequin. Because I I will admit I'm not objective when it comes to that. So I really like just going in and talking about, and sometimes it's books that like I see people talking about on Instagram, and I'm like, seems interesting. Let me go see if the library has it or I own it. Because that's also uh, what happens. I think sometimes you become kind of like a book collector, and you're like, oh God, I've got a few hundred I have not read.
Oh no, girl, you're preaching to the choir on that one because and here's the thing, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining about the fact that like people will
No,
also send me books to read. Like, but believe me, I am very very gracious. Like,
yes,
keep them coming. That's absolutely fine. But when you are also working full time
yes,
or you're being a parent or you're being, whatever
yep,
other hats you wear in your life, there is only so much time that you can devote towards blogging and podcasting and
yep,
reading without it starting to feel like a burden, because that is like the one thing you do not want as a book
yes,
blogger or podcaster or bookstagrammer is to make it feel like work in a
yes.
negative way.
Mm-hmm. And I think also why the podcast really worked for me. I think for a long time I was like, I'm going to blog, and I would start one and then it would go nowhere, and I would start another one, it would go nowhere. And I realized that like I really do like talking, in a way
Yeah.
that writing can feels a little like, nah, girl. Whereas with talking, I'm like, oh, I can go on and on and on. Sometimes I gotta be like, oh, this is getting long. Let's stop here before people are like, yeah, yeah, you're gonna shut up? No, okay. But yeah, no. I basically just talk about romance. A few times I've talked about like just any like I had a webtoon episode, because there are a lot of like cool like romances that are
Mhm.
in graphic novel comic format, and webtoon is this app that you can read all this stuff for free. And I was like, some of them like where I was just like, this is another way to like enjoy romance, especially for people who
Yeah.
might be like, well, I don't know that I can read like a 600-page book. And I'm like, okay, well, here are other options that don't feel as like intimidating or just exhausting.
Mhm.
And then I think, briefly talked about soap operas, because I was a soap opera kid. Like, I would, summer break, I was sitting on my couch watching, all, everything, All My
I was going to
Children,
say,
As
like,
the World
what's your
Turns.
go-to? Like, what was the soap opera of your heart?
I mean, I was one of those weird people that like had favorite couples on every show. So there was a
Mm.
period where I would be flipping through, because like in their heyday ish, like the 90s and early 2000s, before they all got, most of them got canceled, right? It was like, I believe it was All My Children, half of Young and the Restless, and Days of Our Lives were at the same time block. So I'd be like, okay, who's on All My Children that I like? If there was nobody, onto Days, onto, and my mom would be like, what are you doing? And I'd be like, and then Passions also, because Passions was the one soap opera that I got to see it from the beginning, right? Because
Ooh, nice.
Guiding Light, I will always be bitter and salty and angry that Guiding Light was canceled because Guiding Light's history is ridiculous. It started as a radio show, goes to black and white TV, and then color TV. And I was like, and you canceled it for a game show? For a
Oh
game show?
my
I was
God.
enraged. Only at the thought of like, think of the history that you basically throw away because, and now that I look back, it was around that time that there was that huge like writer's strike.
Oh,
So,
okay. Which a lot
yes,
of shows were canceled because of, like, even if they were
yes,
very successful shows, that was okay.
yes.
Okay, that makes a
Because
lot,
at first I
lot
was
more
like,
sense.
I didn't really understand it at the time, and then like I still pay attention to what happens in that kind of world. And then when people were like, yeah, and when the right, and I was like, oh, because I remember at the time not understand. It was like 2009 to 2011 where a slew of them get canceled. I
Yeah.
remember being like, okay, but you're canceling them for talk shows, cooking shows, game
Yeah.
shows. Like, what are people learning in this kind of a format
Well,
when
and
you have
game
this?
shows would make perfect sense because, like, the amount of writing that goes into writing a game show is, like,
Is
ridiculously less than
yes,
what goes into writing a scripted daily show.
yes,
Oh
yeah.
my God. But, like, the fact that it transcended, like, radio to TV and then colored TV. Wow, I didn't know that. How
Yeah,
interesting.
that was something that because in Latin America, right, telenovelas, which is the
Yes.
telenovelas are not a multi-generational, multi-year. They have a beginning, middle, and an end. Like I
Mm-hmm.
feel like the longest ones might go maybe a year and a half
Mm-hmm.
max. Like maybe 2 years if you're really pushing it. And so there's always like one starts, then you have the ending, and then
Right.
on to the next one. And I always thought it was so interesting that like what I called North American soap operas from the big three networks were not that. They were very like we started a
Mm.
story 62 years ago, and here we are. And so, and I think what's fascinating about that, right, is you do get that multi generational aspect of like you could have watched this show with your mom and your grandma, and then you can be watching that show with your kids and your grandkids because it has spanned. Whereas, like for Spanish soap operas, you can be like, I remember when they did this soap opera
Mm-hmm.
back in '72, and now they've redone it in 2002, and
Yeah.
whatever. But it's not. I feel like there's definitely like you could forget or stop watching or whatever. I mean, and then the actors like the actor that plays Eric Newman on Young and the Restless, Victor Braden, I think is his name. He has been in the role for 40 years. Like this is his
Oh my
role. There will
gosh.
never be another Victor Newman.
Well, and also that actor never has to do another job for the rest of
Yeah,
his life. Like
well,
literally, you can
at
just play
all.
Victor Braden forever.
Yes, exactly. He's just Sorry, it's his real name is Eric Braden. His screen name is Victor Newman.
I love
Whatever.
it. You just
He's the
mixed
same.
them.
I was like, wait a minute. I made a mistake. But
He's one and the same. He is
yes,
Victor Newman. No,
yes.
that's so fun. And you know what? Honestly, it makes me think. And I'm somebody who went to school for screenwriting, where they tell you all the different like ways that you could go about your career, and like if you want to write for TV, if you want to write movies, like blah blah blah.
Ah,
Not once was it ever recommended to us, let alone discussed, that you could work on a soap opera, because I feel like soap operas are shit on so
yes,
much that
because
I'm like, are you kidding me? That is like the ultimate job.
yes. And you know what's fascinating to me about that? So I went to school for creative writing, right? And not once
Mm-hmm.
was romance ever spoken of in any way that wasn't derogatory, insulting,
Hmm.
or just plain like just not an option. It was like I think I had maybe one teacher who kind of was like, genre fiction is a thing, and you could do genre fiction. To get to be this author, Denise N. Wheatley, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how many other people would want to write what she's writing,
Right.
but don't because anytime they've ever sort of voiced an interest, it's been shot down
Yeah.
because it's like, no, like, why would you want to write a Christmas romance? That's weird. That's
Honestly,
like,
I think all I want to write is Christmas romance. Like, I feel like all the ideas that I ever have are like Christmas romance. I'm like, maybe that's
yeah,
just, maybe you just rebrand as like Chrissy Kringle, and then it's like, here's all my
yes.
books every year.
It's like every year my books come out around Christmas because they are Christmas themed, and that's what we do. And I mean, hello, Hallmark has clearly
Yeah.
found a market, right? And now not just Hallmark, you've got Netflix getting in on it,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
slowly I'm like, does this mean, that Hulu and Amazon Prime, and I'm
I
sure
think
I'm missing
so.
one,
Yeah.
will, also be like, wait a minute, there is a market for this, because like we can only watch so much of the same, like,
Yeah.
dark, bitter, angry stuff. After a while, it's like
It's true. And I will say,
hard.
I did just watch Single all the way on Netflix, and it was probably one of the best, like, you know what, I'm going to say TV Christmas movie. Like, I recognize that Netflix is like a streaming platform, but it's one of the
It's
better TV styled
yeah.
Christmas movies that I've seen in years. Like, it was very cute. It's their
Oh,
first take on a holiday romance with queer characters. And so it's a
nice.
male romance set during
Oh
Christmas.
wait, is that the one where he brings his best friend home because
Yes.
he's
It was
oh,
so
okay, I have
cute.
to watch it. I have to
So
watch
cute.
it.
And I thought it was funny. I laughed out loud at multiple moments. Is it super steamy and hot? No. Is it super predictable? Absolutely. But honestly, it was just so enjoyable, and the characters felt so much more real than we typically see in like a Hallmark movie.
Oh,
So
that's
I'm
awesome.
like, if Netflix is only going to put out like one or two of these a year, but they're of this quality, that to me is worth so much more.
Yes, that's true. Because I would rather that they be really great instead of being like, you churned out 72 of them, and
It's true.
they were just barely above a D.
Can you imagine, like, every time Hallmark comes out every year and is like, we have 40 new movies coming out this year, and it's always more than the last year. I just cringe because I'm like, 40 movies that you probably all started within this calendar year, and it's just incredible to me that are starring the same 10 people. Like, it's just
Some of which are former soap opera actors. And so I always am like,
many.
oh, I remember you when you were this
Yep, they're
character.
either soap opera actors or they're former child stars all grown up.
Yes.
Well, I think it's time that we talk about this holiday romance at hand. And I will
Yes.
preface this by saying that while a lot of our Boobsmas picks this season have been genuine winners, ones that I've really enjoyed and would be happy to recommend to other folks, this might not be one of them. And what's interesting about this one is that this is actually one that comes highly recommended on Goodreads. And so I was really surprised to see the rating so high after reading this, because I want to say my Goodreads rating for this is closer to like between a 2.5 and a 3 star, which is low for me. Like, it's very rare for me to go below 3 stars, and I think I actually have 2 3 stars or less reads from Boobsmas, and then everything else has been like a 5. So like, there's no in between.
You're like, what is this like? Yeah,
Yeah.
4.67.
Yeah,
Huh.
much higher than I expected for this one. And so I will tell everybody that today we will be discussing Christmas in Full Bloom by Denise N. Wheatley. And this is a contemporary small town romance published in October 2021. It's available on Amazon for $3.99 Kindle edition. And I want to say this is either also part of a series of Denise N. Wheatley, or it has some sort of tie into a holiday romance she published last year around the same time, because I think they're both
Ah.
related kind of in the theme and like the cover art and everything. So I not to sound too bad, didn't care enough to look it up. But
yes, the cover art does give me this feel, but it is definitely set in a different. It's set in Germany, but it is a small town.
oh,
And
okay.
it's all about Christmas.
Okay. Okay.
So I guess it's like they're both Christmas related romances,
But not necessarily
set
like
in a small town, but not in the same town. And I don't
got
think
it. Okay. Okay.
the names of the characters don't ring a bell, so I don't think they show up in the book we
Well,
read.
and reading the book that we read, Christmas in Full Bloom, the only tie-in that I could have possibly seen would be like if the previous book was related to our main character's sister who's getting married in this book. Like I kept thinking,
Yes.
oh, maybe the previous book was her sister's romance. But at the same time, the more we learn about her sister in this book, it seems like she's been together with her fiance
Yes.
forever.
Ever.
So
Yeah.
So standalone romance for sure. And this is one of those ones where I don't want to give too much away before I get into the synopsis, but just I kept waiting for something to happen, like
Yeah.
anything to happen. And I feel like that was kind of like my main letdown, was just sort of not enough of anything going on. So I mean, if you're looking for like a shorter read that's very low in like the angst, low in the heat, and just Christmas vibes, I guess this might be something you want to check out. It definitely did give me Hallmark feel for sure, of like small town going event to an event, you know, cookies here,
Yes.
snowmen there. So I mean, if you do like that, it might be something of interest to you. However, I do feel like there are a lot of books who accomplish that in a much better way.
Same.
Personal takes, though. Obviously, we're all different readers.
Yes.
So let me give everyone the synopsis for Christmas in Full Bloom, and then we will dive into our review. When savvy up-and-coming floral designer Lauren Beal returns home to Maple Valley, Michigan for her sister's holiday wedding, she's determined to be the perfect maid of honor. Can I just say also that this is our second book for the 12 Days of Boobsmas that is set in Michigan?
Oh. Okay, Michigan. Michigan's like, we are the Christmas capital.
I guess they need something, right? You know, so why not?
Yeah. Why not?
She didn't expect the best man to be the college crush she'd reluctantly left behind to pursue her Chicago-based dreams. Family practice doctor Mel Jennings always knew he'd remain rooted in Maple Valley to work for his father's clinic. He happily juggles his demanding practice with philanthropic endeavors that connect him to his tight-knit community. Sparks fly when he reunites with Lauren, the one who ran away. Ran away? I don't know about... I don't know. As they enjoy Maple Valley's Christmas festivities, Mel remembers how close they once were. But can they ever have a future? Lauren finds herself falling for Mel and suspects the feelings are mutual, yet they're both pulled in different directions by work and family. Will the pair find a moment alone during the hectic holiday season to figure things out, or will they miss their chance at love once again? Okay, so
All right.
I'm going to kick things off by saying this is something I've said before on the podcast, but the issue I have with romance stories, not even necessarily holiday related, where characters from out of town come to visit a place, is that there always is going to have to be one of the characters compromising on whether they don't want their career in their, you know, place that they live, if they're going to uproot their lives and move to this new location so that they can be with the other main character. And I'd say that a good chunk of those times where that happens, it's usually the female character who makes the sacrifice, who chooses to leave what is usually the big city and move to a small town with the male character. And that just really bothers me. And because of that, like, inherent bias that I have about those books, this book kind of felt like something that was written 10 to 15 years ago to me. I think that was kind of the main thing I had an issue with, was that a lot of the choices people were making and a lot of the conflict felt like nothing really fresh to me. Like it just felt like something we've seen and kind of in 2021 looked at and been like, that's not really an issue. And yet it was still an issue in the book. Does that make sense?
It does. Because, I mean, I think I like briefly glanced at the synopsis. So when you were reading it and he writes like, or it says like, ran away. For me, ran away is like, there were problems and you ran. Like, abusive family or everyone in your family dying, something. And I was like, she went to Chicago to like start a flower company.
Right.
Like she didn't run away because like life was terrible. She just really had a dream and understood that her dream would succeed in a way in the big city that it wouldn't in the town she was from. And
which is not an unreasonable thought to have
at all. And yes, I do think that so often it is the female character that has to sacrifice or completely change around her life because the male character's like job, profession, career, etc. is so rooted and grounded that they just, which is I think interesting because I'm like, it would have been really cool to see if there was a way to flip that. Like, a fresh take on this would have been either he was returning to town or what had kept him in town for so long was no longer keeping him and he could go anywhere.
Or even that, you know, to start with, Lauren lives in Chicago and Mel lives in their small hometown in Michigan. It is established very early on in the story that to drive back to this town in Michigan takes her about 2 hours. And so to me, it just bothers me that like there isn't even like potentially promise for them to just have a long distance relationship, which is not even long distance. Like I know people, while I was living in LA, you were lucky if you dated somebody that was less than an hour drive from you. Literally just because of the geography and like traffic patterns of LA. So, I mean, living 2 hours away from somebody, I don't think is impossible, especially when you're just beginning a relationship. So, but that wasn't even like a consideration.
No, there is never a conversation of, oh, what's an hour in each direction from us? Like, is there a town over that's an hour from Chicago and an hour from Maple, is it Valley View? Whatever. The Maple Place. Because then they could live there and, like, still be close to, you know, his practice, but also be close to her, like, very booming business.
Yes.
But it was just like, nope, that's not, you know, the epilogue was like, nah, actually, she's moving.
No, she's just going to move. Yep, got to move home. So here's my other big issue. And this is something, it's actually funny, when I was watching Single All the Way, it's something that they touch on in that movie as well, but in a different way, in a much more positive way. So I am so sick and tired of characters who leave their small towns and move to big cities being shamed for making that choice. Like, in this town, when she comes home, there must be at least 4 or 5 different times where her sister, the guy she's interested in, random townsperson number 7, like, all kind of poke fun at her for moving to Chicago. Like, oh, well, that's what you get for moving to a big city, I guess. And I'm just so sick of it because I feel like we never see the reverse. Like, if you ever see like the character who leaves the big city, or no, who leaves a small town to get to the big city, it's more of like, oh, you're the country bumpkin who like doesn't understand how cities work, sort of thing. And eventually they do learn how to make a city work. But in this version, it just is very much like, if somebody wants to move to a small town and get away from big city life, like we've seen during the pandemic, that's fine. And that's kind of what we get in Single All the Way, the lovely Netflix film, is that it's somebody who goes home and realizes kind of that they've been missing out on all these things, that they would prefer to be home and be closer to family. And that's great.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. This one, though, she kept wanting to be in Chicago. She kept telling people over and over again, I have this great established business in Chicago. I get all these clients. I've already got all these clients lined up for the next year to do all these flower arrangements. And then in the end, she still decides it's best to stay in the small town. I did not get it.
And I think it was like, I mean, I'm trying to remember. I feel like it was like, we're expanding the business and et cetera, et cetera.
She's going to like work from home and
Because I also am like, okay, there isn't any acknowledgement of the fact that like, not everyone who grows up in a small town can stay in a small town just because, like, is there enough work?
Right.
Like, do we come from money? Do we have a trust fund? Because we don't have a trust fund. And there are no jobs. Like, he's a doctor. Cool. There's always a need for a doctor. But, like, a florist? A flower design company in a small... How many events could I possibly have here?
It would have been different. And I actually thought this was going to happen, and then it didn't. But there's, at one point, even though she's home for her sister's wedding and she's helping out with that, she's still kind of handling all these, like, work emergency calls for all these events that are happening in Chicago without her. And there's one where I think it's for a hotel that they're like doing some arrangements for, and the hotel loves them so much they decide, we're going to hire you next year to do like our arrangements year round. And I kept thinking, wouldn't it make sense for that to be something that would draw her to the hometown more? Like, oh, I have this incredible floral design company. And by the way, in our hometown, they're opening up this new place that wants to like sign contracts with me. So I do have work here as well. Because what it ends up sounding like is that all of her work is still in Chicago.
Yeah.
So I just was like, I don't understand what's drawing you here. I mean, aside from obviously the love interest and her sister, and apparently no other family, because there's no mention of like parents.
I was very confused
being at this wedding.
Because at first I was like, whatever. But as we got closer and closer to the wedding, I was like, wait a minute. Do they not have their parents both passed? Because
we have no idea.
There's no mention of, I think there's a brief mention of their mother and father, but it doesn't sound like it's in the past tense. But there's also no on-page interaction with either parent for the two sisters. There's no mention of the groom's parents either. The only two parents that I remember being mentioned is the mayor, whose daughter is like, you know, doing the philanthropic thing and also had wanted to leave, but apparently couldn't, which I was like, okay, this sounds very, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Again, if you're only 2 hours outside of Chicago, I'm pretty sure you could move, but okay. And then, like, the love interest father who runs the clinic.
Right.
I don't think we actually see him. We just, you know, are told the love interest father runs the clinic, and that's about it. So I was kind of like, is this a small town where like everybody's parents have like passed away? Like, where are they? We have a whole wedding and there's really like no aunts, no uncles, no grandmas.
It's children of the corn, but all grown up. Like, these are the kids who grew up, and there's no parent. Like,
and for Christmas time,
and no family whatsoever mentioned. Like, and again, like, that's not to say that some people don't spend Christmas. Some people spend Christmas without their families. Some people don't have families to spend Christmas with. That's fine. But again, there's no mention, and so on top of it being the holiday season and not having any family mention, it's also a wedding, and not having family mention just seems so odd. It's just very weird. And so, and then you have the bridesmaids, Lauren's sister's bridesmaids, who are all married to or involved with the groomsmen. It was such a like cookie cutter 1950s like setup that I was just like, this is again why it kept reminding me that I was like, this is not a 2021 book. Like, this just seems so off to me in terms of like the dynamics and the characters, and I don't know, like I don't think there was anything specifically tying it to modern day, so I felt very off.
FaceTime?
Yeah.
Maybe? FaceTime?
They FaceTime, that's true.
The video calls with the laptop, working out of the cafe a bit.
Mm-hmm.
That outside of that, when I think about the fact that there's, this huge lack of family, I'm like, had this been destination wedding or something,
Yeah.
where it's like we've only invited I was like, that would have then made sense to me. But I'm like, I feel like there should have been a mention of like his parents, her parents are no longer with us.
Right.
I didn't see that. So I was expecting, I don't know, at least a moment with the two daughters, the two sisters, and their mother. And we don't get that. There's no mention. Oh, also, the wedding itself, we don't see it.
Yeah.
And I was like,
I did find that weird, considering that this entire, because here's the thing. I'm not going to say that this is like going to get the biggest holiday rating. Like, there are holiday activities they do, but they are always tied to the wedding. If I was giving this book a wedding rating, aside from the fact that we don't see the physical wedding, I think it would be like a 10, because everything, it's all about the wedding.
Party, the festival thing that they go to, it's very centered on the wedding, and the younger sister being stressed out because she didn't get a wedding planner, and da da da.
Yes.
So yes, it's a very wedding focused book, and then they're like, but you don't get to come to the wedding.
By the way, even though I have by no means had a wedding of my own, let me tell you, I have been to a fair share of weddings. I have been in a fair share of weddings, and you do not get to not have a wedding planner and then load all of the wedding planning responsibilities onto somebody else's shoulders, because there is a point where, like, Lauren is doing all the floral arrangements. Yep. She has to go taste the food for the wedding. And then there's a moment where I don't know if it's the wedding itself or if it's like the rehearsal dinner, but her sister says like, oh, don't forget to take pictures and capture video tonight. And I'm just like, oh, so she's your videographer now as well. Okay, interesting.
Well, they are in a small town. Maybe there are no wedding planners in this small town.
They all moved to Chicago. That's where they went.
Because do people get married often enough? Like,
I don't know, but this is the one thing that I will say Denise N. Wheatley does with, I mean, tremendous vigor is she talks about food, and like this book is food porn for sure. Like there is, when they're planning their wedding meal, at one point they're like trying all these different things and they decide on truffle risotto and filet mignon. And I was like, are you kidding? This is the most expensive wedding ever happening.
Yes. No, the way in which food was described, I was like, this is making me hungry. Like, which, don't get me wrong, I do love seeing food in romance because I think that it can show so much. I don't necessarily know that we saw as much. I mean, we got to see that they love eating. Right? And that food definitely brings everybody together. I did love the cafe scene where the cafe owner was kind of like, don't worry, it's on me, and like you're gonna go sit with the guys, and like, oh my god, you're eating all of that. I wasn't too much of a fan of like, oh, will I fit into my dress? But I was like, I get it. Like that is a thing that happens around weddings where people are freaking out. Like, will I fit into my dress?
That
I can't eat X, Y, Z.
That feels dated to me as well, especially in like the last couple of years when we've like leaned so heavily into like the idea of body positivity, like to focus so heavily on, am I going to fit into my dress? I'm on this epic diet. I can't eat anything. Like it was basically like her sister's entire personality was the fact that like she wanted to eat, but she couldn't because she was on this diet for her wedding. And it just, that was another thing that just did not feel current to me.
Because it also wasn't really clear that, like, I don't know, it didn't feel, I guess in that it's always like that weird wrap up of like how big are you? How small are you? Like, I have no idea. So you could literally, I don't know, be 102 pounds soaking wet. So then, like, what are you doing? Just eat your food. Like, or, you know, are you bigger? I have no, like,
That's actually a
there's
great
no,
point.
right? Because there's no, do we even get their heights?
Okay, no,
Like,
that's exactly what I was going to follow up with is this is something that, here's the thing. When I write, and this kind of draws back to like my screenwriting background, is I don't necessarily write in physical characteristics of like what a person's race is, what their height is, what their body shape is, unless it like informs the things they say and do. It informs,
yes.
you know, the fact that like, oh, they're talking about, you know, having a big ass and loving it. Great. I want to specify that this is like a curvy woman, you know?
Yeah.
But it's not something that I generally specify. And so when I read books, if it is not specified what a character looks like, I usually kind of look to the cover models and assume, okay, is this what we're going for? I'm just going to assume yes. But I will say, I don't think I've ever read a book with as vague descriptions of characters, because I honestly don't even remember there being any descriptions of Lauren or Mel. So
No.
I don't think you would know.
There's the brief moments, like, because she shows up hella sick. That was interesting because my first thought was like, ooh, COVID. But I was like, no, it's just the flu. It's just the flu. This is not a COVID book, everybody. So if you're looking for a romance that isn't touching on COVID, even though it's written during this time, it does not, COVID does not exist in this world, and that's fine. But there's a brief talk of, she's kind of like, why would you invite him when I look terrible, my wig's a mess and something. So I was like, oh, I guess she wears wigs, or she does, you know, her hair. And it seems like she definitely lost weight because she had that flu and wasn't eating. So then I was like, yeah, I too would be like, I'm going to stuff my face. I haven't eaten for 4 days. Like, hello. Or 6 days, however many days.
Oh, that was the most realistic part of the entire book, let's be honest.
Where I was like, yes, I too would be like, give me everything. But it was a very interesting, like, we didn't ever really get, like, I don't know how tall the groomsmen were. I'm guessing they were not sure.
I don't know what anybody looked like. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. And it's granted, like, I think there's something nice about, I do think there's something nice about not knowing or like not having to specify, because then it's like you can picture them however you want.
Yes.
And that's fine. I do understand that. Although I do still feel like I want some kind of description. Like I don't know, because I feel like normally there is a physical attraction as well between characters. Like maybe it's the person's eyes, maybe it's their
forearms.
Yeah, whatever it is. But I feel like that also wasn't present. And so it was really hard for me to understand like what they were attracted to in the other person. And obviously physical beauty is just a minor component of attraction, but it is usually the one that you draw on first. And they have history together, so obviously they do know each other from the past. But if you haven't been together in several years and you haven't seen the other person, things are bound to change. Your bodies change, your hair changes. I mean, so I just feel like it was one of those things where I'm like, this is so weird that I don't normally focus on the physical characteristics of our characters. However, in this case, there was like nothing to even draw on.
Yeah, there was nothing to draw on. And I was also kind of like, okay, she goes back and looks like he's, you know, still good looking. But I was also like, okay, but what else? Like,
right.
I don't see it. And I think maybe had I had a better idea of what they looked like physically or them interacting in a way that reminded me of that. But I was like, you guys keep being interrupted when you're talking. I don't really know what it is you see in each other. that by the end of this book, you're like, I have
Right.
feelings. I was like, feelings about what?
Yeah. What is it
What are
you
your
have feelings about? Yeah. So my two other things, which I want to mention, and ironically also both tie into outdated tropes and character types. One is the fact that there's a scene. There's a scene where I think they're playing mini golf, which I will say I did like whatever this holiday festival was that they went to, because
Yeah.
there's like winter mini golf and there's a food truck festival, and I did think to myself, this is pretty cool. I would definitely go to this
Yes.
event. But she's about to swing her mini golf, and he does that thing where he comes
Yeah.
up behind
Let me
her.
show you.
Let me show you where to put your hands. Oh no. So what you need to do is relax your grip. Da-na-na. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? We're going to play this game. We're going to play
Yes.
this game? Really?
Yes.
2021?
For mini golf.
For mini golf.
Mini golf. Which was like, I was like, okay, I guess. I didn't hate it because I was like, wow, so they're like interacting in a much more physical fashion.
Yes,
That they
that I
haven't
like.
up until this point. I was like, oh, okay, maybe we're going to see some action.
No.
No, we're not.
The other thing is the tried and true classic of interrupted kisses and like ruined moments, because
I was annoyed.
Look, you can get away with one, no problem.
Two.
You can maybe do two, you know, like if there's like kids around or something, like there's those damn kids always ruining the moment. I get it. This one,
were there kids at all?
Probably not, because there's no parents either.
Now that, as soon as you said kids, I was like, wait, were there any children?
Everyone is between 25 and 35.
Oh my
and
God.
that's it.
So this is actually paranormal, isn't it? Okay. All right. Well,
I'm telling you, children of the corn, all grown up in Michigan.
Seriously. But yeah, the constant interruptions.
All the time. Like I'm just ballparking it here. I think it was at least 7 or 8 times.
No, it was every time they were finally about to have a moment, about to, you know, because it took forever for the two of them to get together one-on-one on what wasn't a date but was a hangout, whatever they wanted to call it. That took way too long. I was like,
not even to like share their feelings. Like this was literally like them trying to find a moment to go on a date. Not even like, let's tell each other how we feel. Like, not on the date, just I'm about to ask you on the date and then I was interrupted. And you're like,
really?
How many times can that happen?
Yes. They're the demands on them because of their jobs. I was like, this is obnoxious. This is obnoxious. If you're both this busy, then there's no reason to be in relationships. And we can
you're not meant to be together.
Or with anyone. If you're busy that your phone is going off, do not disturb doesn't exist, then you don't have time to be in a relationship with anybody, whether they are in a small town, a whole 2-hour drive away, or in the same city as you. Like, it's just not possible.
No, like, because literally you can't finish a conversation because you're always answering your phone. And it's not just her. It's him too. It's both of them constantly. And not even her employees, her partner in business clearly cannot handle anything on her own. Like, what a terrible partner. And
I will say for that, it was very clear that, like, this was Lawrence. You know, when, like, because there were a few comments where it was like, Sasha, that's her name, had like wanted to be in fashion design. So it's more like Sasha was like, I don't know what to do with my life. And Lauren was like, come work with me. And I'll make you partner because you're my best friend. Da, 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 da. I don't know that she was like partner, like I am equally as like talented in this. It was more like, and I can understand, like, this is the first time she's not at home for Christmas. They've got all these massive like events that they, you know, will sort of be that like big break kind of thing. So I didn't have a problem so much with Sasha reaching out.
No, honestly, Sasha is probably the character I would have rather read a story about. Like the fact that like She's left with the business on her own for the
Yes.
first time in the big city at the busiest
Time
time
of
of
year.
year,
Yes.
and having to like scramble to make all these things work. Oh, maybe she has a romance with the hotel owner,
Yes.
billionaire of the hotel that hires them. Like,
Or maybe the
yep,
flower distributor that she had to like run to and be like, oh my god, these people changed their minds at the last minute about this,
help
and now
me.
I need these. And the guy's looking at her like, okay, I mean, I've got this
Ooh,
really
yes.
cool, kind of secret, conservatory, and you're in luck.
A
I've got the blooms for
cranky
you.
I've got the blues for a cranky male florist. Like that would have given me so much life. See, we've just written a whole different book.
Oh my god, a cranky male florist would have been so good.
That would have been amazing. And Sasha, who's like, oh my God, I want to prove to my boss that I can do a good job, even
Yes.
though I'm not that great at this. Like having to work together, like, oh,
Yes.
would have loved that.
That would have been top tier, honestly.
Top tier.
Um,
Yeah.
that's not the book we got. Sorry, guys. Sorry. That's the
No.
book we
Well, and
got.
this is typically the time where I would say let's share a steamy sexcerpt.
But
You know,
there weren't any.
no, and honestly, sometimes you still get like a sexy kiss or like something or some kind of foreplay that you're like, ooh, I don't even need them to have sex. Like this is really hot. But no, I think the hottest scene is like him teaching her how to mini golf.
Yeah, that's probably the one where I was like, oh, okay, something's happening here. Which I was also kind of like, but it has to be in front of everybody. Okay.
And here's the thing, as much as I dislike that thing of like, let me show you how to hold the club, why it could have been her teaching him how to mini golf. And I would have preferred that because I know people are like, well, isn't that the same thing? No, because you're subverting what we're given as like the norm, what we're given as the standard.
It would be really cool that he's like a doctor. It's like, girl, I don't know nothing about golf.
Yes,
and he's like,
that would have been funny.
And she's like, well, let me show you.
Yeah,
that would have been really like cute and funny and just like, oh, okay.
I would have loved that. Yeah,
Yes.
no, I will say, I like a lot of different pieces in this book. Like, I like that she's a floral designer. I like that he's the small town doctor. I like a Christmas wedding. Like, give me a Christmas wedding, like, any time of day. It's just that they all didn't necessarily
come together,
fit into the same puzzle for me. Like, it felt like we were forcing them into the puzzle. So not my favorite. I'm torn about whether or not I want to read more Denise N. Wheatley, because I will say I didn't dislike the writing itself. I do think there were some times where we got a little bit of like exposition drop on us, like like exposition vomit, where it would just be like, oh, you haven't been back in town in 5 years, blah, 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 blah. And that definitely puts me off a little bit. However, I don't know. I might be willing to read another one of her books.
Yeah, I mean, the writing wasn't... I mean, I've definitely read books where I'm like, this writing is awful and this editing is boo-boo, and what were they thinking? I feel like a New York City rat could have done a better job. It was not that at all. The writing was... Sometimes it did feel a little like you're, showing me things, or you're not showing, you're telling me things, and I kind of wish you would show me.
Yes.
Thank you. But it wasn't that. And I also wonder if this wasn't a novella and had been a longer book, and we had more information about both characters, the town, the family, etc. It could have also been a really good, because it's not a terrible premise.
No, not at all.
I just think it's like, due to the length of it, and due to just like information that we don't get, I definitely felt kind of like, because we get to the epilogue and I was like, what? What?
Yeah.
What do you mean? I'm confused. But I wonder what her full-length books are like.
Exactly. And here's the thing is, like, even when I'm thinking about like Hallmark movies, they have a very specific structure to Hallmark movies. Like, if people don't know, they use what I think is a 9-act structure to write their movies. And the way you can figure it out is that count the amount of commercial breaks. Like that's your act break in a Hallmark movie. And so as somebody who has written and done some development with Hallmark, I'm a little more familiar with the structure. And so this is one where it's like I could almost apply it to a Hallmark movie, but even then there wasn't that through line that you needed to like, there's always the, well, what do we have to do? We have to save the store. We have to find a date for this party. Like, and this I think was missing that. Like, I think
that whole toy drive thing would have been cooler if she was helping him with the toy drive.
Yes.
Because, so what I found that I was like, oh, wow. I don't generally like when a book is like, look, there's a potential other love interest. I'm like, why?
I don't like that either.
And so whatever her name was, I think it was Alyssa, I was kind of like, okay, why is this happening? And why are you making us have this whole, like, is he with her and just not telling her? And da-da-da. And I was like,
nope.
And what would have also been a way for them to spend time together on the page is if Lauren had been helping him with this, like, fancy toy drive or whatever.
Exactly.
That would, and then of course that's like that thing that we're trying to get all these toys, or we're trying to raise all the money to get all these toys, instead of just, they were both working on things that were important but fully separate from each other.
And they never came together. No. It was never like, let me help you being a doctor. Let me help you with your floral arrangements. Nope. That was the thing, was that they both had these independent projects that had nothing to do with each other. It could have been the toy drive. It could have been him having to help her with her sister's wedding. Yes, it could have been, he was the best man. Yeah, exactly. That's the thing, is like, Denise N. Wheatley has written in the setup for multiple options of where the through line could have gone, but it wasn't there. Like, there was no follow through on,
because the groom, the best man, maid of honor thing, like, like, it's a classic. It is a classic. Like, I feel like, you know, it's kind of like, oh well, of course. And so there could have also been like they're working, you know, there was maybe a teeny tiny bit of trying to work together when the groom, like, sprains his ankle. Right. Had she gone to taste the food with him instead of her sister, because her sister's so busy with her, you know, what is she, a financial planner, advisor, whatever. Mm-hmm. That would have been like, oh, okay.
Would have made perfect sense. Like, we have to pick the food. We have to pick the music. We have to make sure the venue's okay. Like, the thing about a wedding story, and I love a wedding story, is that there's so many conflicts that come with planning a wedding that it's like, you don't even have to try. Like, they are already there, and then you just have to deal with them together. And so I think that could have been great. I think the toy drive could have been great if there was something with, like, her floral arrangements in town. Like, that could have been a thing. But it's just, I think that's one thing that, had there been a clear through line, I think it would have solved a lot of the problems, because I think a lot of things would have just naturally been tied up a little bit better than they were. So yeah, not my favorite. Not even necessarily one I would recommend. I do think it could make for a Hallmark story if there was, like, a through line added, but as is, meh.
It's missing some things that would make it like a romance that you would be like, oh, okay, I got the payoff I was looking for. It was trying. It was trying to reach that finish line. It didn't quite make it.
It's like you stopped right before you got to the finish line and just, like, laid down.
And the finish line was like, they thought it had crossed the finish line and there was still like another 10 meters.
But it had laid down and started to nap and, like, cool off. And it's like, is it worth it at this point? Like, I'm just going to lay here.
Yeah.
Well, with that being said, let's give this book a few grades, Essie. Okay. So we are going to be grading for heart, humor, heat, and holidays, because of course it is the 12 days of Boobsmas, so we have to have a holiday ranking. And on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the very best that it could possibly be, for you, of course. So let's start with the heart rating. What do you think?
Okay, so I had written down a 5, being
Okay.
very like smack in the middle. The more I talked about it and thought about it, it slid all the way down to like a 4.25.
Yeah,
I
I gave this one a
mean,
4, so we're on the same
there wasn't
page.
any fighting,
No.
like, which was kind of cool. Like, it wasn't like I go back to help my sister for her wedding and we're screaming at each other and I'm reading it going, so why are you there? So that was nice. But the main couple, I was also like, where's that heart?
They don't spend a lot of like quality time together. So I mean, we basically have like a couple scenes where it's the
Yep.
two of them on their own. And other than that, they're always being interrupted. They're with other people or like part of a group thing. So even though it's the holidays, even though there's a wedding, there's just not
Yep.
a lot of falling in love happening. So yeah,
Not with who they are right now. It's very
no.
possible that they were falling in love with like each of them being like, everything I know about you from the past and like my brief glimpses of you now is enough
Not for
for me to
me.
fall. Yeah, I mean, I too would have been like, this is not enough. Like, if I'm only gonna see you like 3 times in this wedding, like I'm going back to Chicago. But
Yep.
apparently, Lauren, who wasn't desperate, was like, I am settling for this
Yeah.
happily.
Good for her.
Mm.
I'm not going to judge anybody else's standards for love. Good for you.
Exactly.
How about humor?
I don't remember there being. I wrote down 5 again, but now I'm like, why did I write down 5? I don't remember there being laugh out loud.
I don't think there was anything that made me laugh. I don't think it was necessarily meant to be funny. I think the word I would use to describe it would be like lighthearted. Like it's not angsty, it's not heavy, but it just is what it is. Like it's them planning a wedding.
Yeah, there really isn't anything where I'm like,
I might give it
that
a
was...
not applicable for this one just
Yeah,
cuz I don't think it's funny, but I don't think it's meant to be funny either.
I'll give it a 1.
Okay. Heat, I am just gonna skip right past because
And then I was like, can I write 0? And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 1 to 10. And I was like, 1.
I think
but
they
yeah,
have
there's
like a kiss.
yeah, that's
right?
like at the end. Like, there was a part of me that was like I looked at the cover again and I was like, this isn't like a love inspired like Christian romance, right? Right? Okay.
Could have been.
Could have been. Like, what was missing was, a church, a pastor, a priest, that kind of stuff. But
Yeah,
outside of
the
that,
wedding.
the wedding. But yes, this main couple doesn't have any, like, there are no hot and heavy moments. There are no hot moments. There aren't any heavy moments.
No fantasizing, no.
Oh, yeah.
No, nothing. I mean, it really, they have a kiss at the end. It very much follows the Hallmark formula of end with a kiss. And that's fine, but is it hot? No. So, I mean, that's why I'm like, skip it. Holidays, I'm torn about because, again, I do think there are a lot of fun things that sound like a tradition for this town, like a holiday food truck festival. Are you kidding? I would sign me the fuck up for that.
Where is that and on what day?
And they give all the different like the different trucks that sell food and drinks. It's all like holiday themed.
Oh, and then there was that restaurant that he took her to where the chef had like a specific holiday menu. And then he had convinced him to have like other specific holiday only items. So I was like, okay.
Love
y'all take Christmas.
Love seriously. The food. And then when they have their weird joint bachelorette party thing, it's at the winter festival where they have like a private, tent cabana thing just for them. And there's decorations and they're decorating cookies. So while it all is very much tied to the wedding, I do think the holiday ranking for this one would be like my highest rating. I might give it like a 7 for like the holiday stuff. Maybe a 6 just because I don't think the feelings associated with the holidays were there. I don't think like the emotional ties to the holidays were there. It was very much more of like the physical activities you do during the holidays, and there happens to be a
Okay.
wedding. But not a lot of like, oh, I'm so thankful, or I'm happy to be spending time with the people I love. Like,
Oh, okay. I see what you
you
mean.
know what I mean? It was a lot more physical than like emotional as far as like the holiday content went.
I put 8.5 because I was like, this is just like bleeding
Ooh.
Christmas everywhere. Because to me, it just felt like she comes home for Christmas. Like there's
Yeah.
all this talk about Christmas. Yes, it's her sister's wedding. I mean, there wasn't a lot of like, I'm so thankful to be with my family. But again, like, where was
There's no
family other
family.
than her sister? And she was really thankful to be like spending this time with her sister,
Yeah, that's true.
which I thought was like, oh, that is really nice that like you were able to like, walk away from, not walk away, but like do remote work essentially. So for me, I was just like, this is a lot of Christmas activities,
And there's a
a lot
tree
of like,
lighting. I forgot about the
yes,
tree. Okay, I'll leave it at a 7.
the tree light. Oh right, because she gets to go, and her sister. Why doesn't her sister go? Because what was
I
her
don't know. She's
sister?
like
I don't know,
busy.
doing something. I don't know. She was dieting, drinking some juice. I don't remember. It was something that I was like, really? That's why you didn't show up? So for me, I was like, okay, this feels very like you're just doing a lot of things. So, like you could have just
Mm-hmm.
gone home and just focused on wedding stuff that had nothing to do with Christmas. So I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, for that reason alone, I'm like, yeah, you can have the 8.5.
Totally fair. No, I'm with you. I will say I do think it's funny. The more that I think about it, even though they're in Michigan, I don't really remember them mentioning snow or like the weather as much, which
True.
it's not necessarily a negative thing. It just surprised me,
Yeah,
like considering that we're reading another book for Boobsmas set in Michigan, and it's like snow, 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 snow. So
that is true. There was not like, oh, I was snowed in or so. She did that 2-hour drive, and was there snowing on the
I
way?
don't remember like any mention of snow. That's not to say that it wasn't there. I just don't remember it. I don't remember it. So
Yeah,
but I did expect there to be
like it could
more.
have been set in like North Carolina or South Carolina
Yeah.
with the lack of snow. Yeah, yeah. Like there was, I think there was like, well, it's kind of cold, but
Mhm.
there wasn't like, and it's snowing or it's about to snow or we're worried
Yeah.
about snow. No.
No, it was a Hallmark winter where everyone can wear a jean jacket and a
Yes,
light scarf
and
and
be
be
fine
perfectly fine.
because what are parkas? We don't know them.
Oh gosh, it would be very different if somebody made like a realistic holiday movie because people aren't cute during the cold months. Like if
What do
you
you
live somewhere cold.
mean? What do you mean? Everybody is out here in like the most perfect fitting winter coat with the matching accessories, gorgeous
Mhm.
boots, and no
Yeah.
salt stains anywhere.
No, no.
What?
This is why they don't set holiday movies in like Minneapolis because let me tell
I
you,
mean, they
that is
do, and then it's never real because you're like, where? Why does the car not have snow tires on? Where are the snow chains? What?
it's so true. It's so true. So, I mean, to sum everything up, not our favorite read in general,
No.
but overall, kind of tying back into what we said at the beginning, I'd love to see just like some different representations of
Yes.
like what holidays look like because as much as people love reading about the coming home to the small town and it's snowing outside in Vermont, like that's great, but
What else?
I would be just as intrigued and I would be more likely to remember
Yeah.
something if it set itself apart from the rest. Like the one I remember the most, the two I remember the most from Boobsmas 2020 were A Very Witchy Yuletide, which
Ooh.
takes place during Yule. It's the only Yule romance I've ever read. And Sweet on You by Carla de Guzman, which takes place in the Philippines at Christmas time.
Ooh. Yeah.
And it's like sweltering hot.
Yeah, that I definitely see what you're saying because when it sticks so much to that very specific like back to the small town, then it just is like, so what makes you different from every other return to the
Yeah,
hometown, whatever, whatever. Um
right.
Yeah, because what would the story have been like if, like, either it been about Sasha, or what if her sister was getting married in Chicago instead of the small town?
Amen.
You know what I mean? It's like, I've lived in the small town my entire life, but I would like a big city wedding.
Yes.
You know, since I've been with my fiance since we were high school sweethearts.
Yes.
Which I was just like, why it take y'all so long to get married? But
I know. They said it'd been over 10 years. I was like, ooh, girl, you holding out.
Damn, okay. But yeah, like, what if it had been a destination wedding? Or just no wedding at all?
I think one of us needs to get out there and write this cranky florist story.
The cranky florist sounds actually really, really, like, I would want to read that. A cranky florist who's having to deal with, like, an event planner who is like, so I know that I just ordered, 97 poinsettias. I now need like 97, I don't know, something really hard to get. And he's looking at them like, what?
You need what now?
In December in the Northeast? Let me kill you. You know what I mean? Or vice versa. Like,
yep.
I need pine trees. And it's like, you need pine trees 2 days before Christmas. Like, the Christmas tree farms didn't get them all.
Best of luck.
Yeah. Him being the small town doctor, I was like, I almost was like, couldn't he have been the small town vet? I would have liked that more.
Yeah.
But that's me.
Let's make florist the new baker. Like, I feel like we have so many sexy baker romances, and now we've started to see some male bakers in romance.
Yes.
I want florists to be the next one. Like,
yes,
florists are the new bakers. We're saying it here and now. We are manifesting it into existence.
I need it. Because think of how, like, amazing that'll be.
Yep.
To just see, like, male florists that are grumpy.
Oh, I'm here for it.
And florists are in high demand because of the season, because of all the parties.
Yes.
So this is, like, clearly a good time to set up, like, a male florist who's really busy. Yeah, same.
He's good with his hands.
Whoever is out there listening, ready to write, we would like a male florist.
Well, and honestly, not to talk too much about that super cute Netflix movie, Single All the Way, but the main character has a thing for plants. He loves plants.
See?
He talks to and names his plants. And so I was like, I connect with you on so many levels.
Plant daddy already. Look at that.
He was a plant daddy. Like, it was so great. We need more plant daddies in the world.
Yep.
Well, Essie, this has been such a treat. I'm so excited, now having met you in person, to have this recording with you and revisit all the fun we had again.
I know. This has been very, very cool. I really enjoyed it.
Yay.
I really enjoyed it.
Yay. Thank you so much. And what, will you be staying in New York for Christmas this year?
Yeah, I will be going. So my parents, like, live in Canada, and just due to everything that's happening, with variant, whatever. Right. What is it?
I don't know. It sounds like a Transformer character. It's like Omega Cron.
And people jokingly have called it the Omarion variant.
Very
I'm like,
cute.
Where my icebox, So due to all of that, I'm like, I'm gonna be just, be staying local and then try to see them later in the year. So I'm not sure what I'll be doing. Probably trying to stuff my face, because that's what the holidays are for.
Well, if you need a guide on what to make, you can reconsult this book, because she got plenty of options for food in this story.
Very true. Yeah. Yes.
Well, I guess there's nothing left for us to do but say, on the 9th day of Boobsmas, my lover gave to me 9 naughty spankings.
Little naughty.
On the 9th day of Boobsmas, my lover gave to me 9 naughty spankings, 8 rock hard abs, 7 minutes in heaven, 6 billionaires, 5 penis rings, 4 dukes of fucking, 3 butt plugs, 2 nipple clamps, and a hot hookup underneath the tree.
Thanks so much for listening. Boobies and Newbies is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts.